All right.
Hmm.
Very nice. Okay. We're recording. Okay. So this is supposed to be a very chill conversation. We don't have any set agenda. This
Right.
is just to explain to viewers what we're doing. We want to do a monthly episode with some of the leaders of the Canaanist movement to get us in conversation with each other, talking about current events, about ideology, and everything in between. And so this is the first of a monthly segment we're going to do on the Canaanite podcast or on the Pan Levantine podcast.
Mhm.
We don't have to do any formal introductions. Everyone on the call has been on the podcast before. But I want to start off by talking about an important development we've had in the movement in that we published our political platform. We now have a Substack which acts as our publication. It's called the National Canaanite. And on that publication, me, David, and a Palestinian colleague of ours by the name of Anton Mansour worked together on a piece to outline our entire political platform. It's everything we've talked about on the podcast before, nothing new. We talked about unifying Israel-Palestine under one state Canaan, under a common national identity where we're full and equal participants. And from there, working to unify the entire Levant under a common national ethos. But I want to start off with David. David, I want to get your input on the document before we hand it off to either Hayan or Bilal.
On the document.
Yes, or just the ideology, what we wrote about, anything in between.
That's a good place to start. So let's start with the word ideology. And that's going to be my piece. The next piece is going to come out next week because we were talking together about ideology and how much. So we're developing an ideology because any ism, I don't like isms. Do you know what I mean by this?
Yeah.
Isms cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like once you have an ideology, it can get pretty scary. Like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and what my piece is going to be talking about is how I'm seeing this as culture. I'm looking at this from a culture, like I'm an artist, and I'm looking at this from a cultural point of view. I understand that we live in a real world and there's going to be politics, and obviously there's going to be a political element to being a Canaanite, and that will we're calling this Cananism, right? But will always focus on the cultural side of it, whereas like I'm not a Canaanist, I'm a Canaanite. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a nuance, but like this is an identity. It's an identity first.
Yes, it's also important for us to dive deeper into what you mean by a Canaanite, right? I think many of the viewers might question: Are you saying your personal identity is the same as the people from 3,000 years ago, or do you mean in the national sense, right? Like, oh, we're uplifting our common roots between Jews and Palestinians, which go back to our ancient Levantine predecessors. Is that what you mean in terms of a national identity, or do you mean a personal identity?
So I guess I mean both. I mean it's a national identity. But as I delve deeper into my Jewish roots, I see how my Jewish roots are part of a bigger Canaanite identity, which would make me kind of Canaanite. You know, like
it's an offshoot.
I see myself as Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what is this place? What's this place? I feel myself as I belong to this place also, where I live right now. What do we call this place? I mean, lately I've been calling it Palestine. Publicly, I've been calling it Palestine, and I do that for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I want to emphasize that this is a Palestinian homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And then it actually feels like Palestine to me. It's also Canaan. It's also Canaan, right? So and it was Canaan before it was Palestine.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're all on the same page about this, but like from my perspective, it was Canaan before it was Palestine.
Mhm.
That doesn't erase Palestinian identity, and it doesn't erase. You can even continue to call this place Palestine, but before it was Palestine, it was Canaan, and so I belong to this place. So if this place is called Canaan, then I'm Canaanite.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People who have no connection to this land, who feels connected to this land, maybe at one time in the future, they come here, then they would get a Canaanite like identity card, like become a part of the nation.
It's so interesting because basically, like everything that you just mentioned, David, if you noticed, it's so words are so powerful, right?
Yes. Oh my.
The meaning behind words are just so influential, powerful, and impactful on people's lives, on the way people perceive things. It makes me think about, for example, prior to the establishment of Israel, the Zionist movement was actually debating on calling their state Palestine versus Israel, and how that affects things, and how that could alienate some people, or add people, or unite people. So the words used are so important, but more importantly than that, as you mentioned, there's certain things that are infinite, that are the same regardless of the words that are used to describe it, like the land itself, right? Canaan, Palestine, Israel. I mean, God knows how many other words have been used to signify this piece of land that we all cherish for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, my family, I can tell you that my connection to the land has to do with the fact that my forefathers, my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents cultivated the land with their hands. They grew olive trees, and every time they would plant an olive tree, they would name it after one of their kids. That we have. There's a very, very kind of visceral connection there from that perspective, right? And at the same time, you have Jews all over the world that have a deep religious connection to the land, where the land is part and parcel of their beliefs and of their thoughts and of their prayers. And so, the last, I think the reason why you're using the word Palestine is because I think the last time that religion and ethnicity didn't necessarily have a limitation factor on who can live there was probably when it was still called Palestine. And I think that's, if I'm kind of like trying to explain your words, but correct me if I'm wrong, that might be the reason why you feel that connection to the word Palestine rather than Canaan right now, for example. Whereas I think maybe the fact that we want to use Canaan and we want to use that original word that everybody can agree on, that doesn't have all that political baggage, might be a solution forward. And I think that that's beautiful, because you really kind of explained it, with the way that you see it and the way that's kind of historically, been attributed,
Yeah.
I'll tell you. Let's build on this. Okay, like I'm calling it Palestine because let me gather my thoughts. Okay, I've for a long time I've really thought this place really should be called Canaan. Okay, I've been calling it Israel a lot, until 4 years ago, when I really started to understand what is going on here, and like it's just like, I don't know how to say this, like I don't know how I didn't see it before, but let's just put that aside for a second. Then I realized I need to start addressing this as this place is Palestine. I live in Palestine. Okay, there's Palestinian people. They exist. They're being erased. Like, you're not supposed to say this word. You're not supposed to say the word Palestine. I'm gonna say that the Palestinian people. This is Palestine. Now we want to call it Canaan. I don't want that to then dilute the message. You know what I mean? And that's I hope we have to figure out a way how we don't fall into that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But by dilute, you mean in the sense of the oppression that the Palestinian people are going through, and we do not want to erase that story, their connection to land. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm thinking a couple of steps forward, and I'm like, okay, what's going to be the backlash? You know what I mean? Because this world is so toxic right now.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, and people are going to find a problem. People are going to question our intentions.
For sure.
People are going to look. I'm Jewish. There's this issue of coexistence is a bad word, and I mean like let's put the cards on the table. Like I wanted to address this before we started to go live, because it could get really like personal. But like, I am a Jewish person who moved here. I wasn't born here. I moved here, right? You're I'm talking to Bilal. You're a Palestinian. You're in diaspora. I'm not sure how easy it is for you to move here, even to visit. Like, this is a huge problem. We need to put that on the table
for sure.
first, right?
It's a bizarre situation that we're all in. There's no question about it. It is a bizarre situation.
Like, this is our first time speaking. Like, we spoke a little bit texting, you know, but like, this is the first time that we've actually spoken. I almost wanted to like just start this like without recording first, like just so I can meet you. But like, I'm completely like aware of the absurd and like just unjust situation that we're in.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of this. Like, I understand that this is like, I don't know what to do about it.
If I may, that's why in Canada, like, we start off events very explicitly, like, with that, what is it called? The acknowledgement, the native acknowledgement. Yeah. Like, it just gets it on the table. Like, this is occupied land, you know what I mean? And I was thinking of starting this call with that, you know, but
you know, and this I know this sounds I'm going to play devil's advocate here for just a minute. Okay, this has obviously affected me my entire life in many different ways. It's affected my family in many different ways, and all of that. But first of all, I'm glad that we recorded this, because I want to show. I think it's important for us to realize that we've all been going through this for 70 plus years. It's at this point now, we acknowledge and we know that everybody's been affected in many different ways. Yeah. And now it's like, I don't even necessarily, I feel like every moment that we spend worrying about that is a moment that we can spend really just like, we both need to feel comfortable, you know? Yeah. And I wish we can get past that point. Every Palestinian you're going to see, they have a story. Every Israeli that I meet, they have a story. That's true. But at the same time, it's like we're not going to be able to understand each other's trauma. I think the trauma is different. Yeah. But that's okay. That's like what I'm trying to say is it's okay. This is
it's also very. So yeah. It's very different, but also it's very similar. Like I really do these days more and more feel like let's not say the Jewish people and the Palestinian people are really the same people in so many fundamental ways. Like for me, the Nakba started in Europe in the 40s, you know, and then it trickled into Palestine, because what happened to my great grandmother and my grandmother and great grandparents and their whole family, like, how is that not exactly what's happening?
It's a profound way to look at it. It's like exactly the same.
I mean, Shoah, the word Shoah and Nakba literally both mean catastrophe, right? And so it's passing. Passing pain on to another people.
I want to start talking about the Nakba that my grandmother went through and the Holocaust that's happening right now, because they're just this. It's the exact same concept in two different languages, and using two different vocabulary to talk about the exact same thing in my is a healthier way to look at it. And also it will look, it's something that happened to two people that are connected to this land, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're like two different tribes that split off for hundreds and hundreds of years, and this tribe augments in this way and this augments in a different way, and then we come back when we meet and we can't recognize each other anymore, and now we're coming, like we're kind of getting over the hump, right? And now we're like, oh, wait a minute, like, no, we're the same people, like we're going through the same thing, and we both love the same land, and okay, let's figure out how to build this. Starting now, let's figure out how to build this together.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because me and Bilal were touching on this the last time we spoke.
Yeah.
The way that Jews express their yearning for the land. They were expelled by the Romans 2,000 years ago. They were in many, especially the Ashkenazim, they were enslaved into Europe. Others were expelled throughout the Middle East, but they had this continuous yearning to return to the land. And now it seems Palestinians have taken that position, right? The position of Jews 2,000 to the contemporary day is now the position of Palestinians. And when we talk about our two peoples being the same, yes, we mean literally in like an ancestral sense. We share physical genealogical roots, but in the metaphorical sense, I think we do share so much more than people realize in the exact experiences of our ancestors. And it's just so fascinating because we talk a lot about the cultural similarities, the Kafi and the Talit, how Palestinian Arabic has more Hebrew than any other dialect of Arabic because they are the descendants of ancient Hebrews. But it's so fascinating when you look at a sense of trauma and a sense of yearning, just how similar two peoples are. And I think when we talk about our two traumas being different, they are different. But I think our two peoples are best positioned to understand the other's trauma more than any other. I truly believe that. And so that's why it makes me so upset in Jewish spaces, especially when there's a lack of empathy for the Palestinian people. Because in my eyes, we should be able to empathize more than any other with the Palestinian people. Our ancestors were expelled from this land 2,000 years ago, just as Palestinians were ethnically cleansed in 48. Our ancestors have been these people roaming land to land, never feeling a belonging because we wanted to return to our ancestral homeland. That is what Palestinians are currently going through. So it's so shocking when I see Zionist politicians saying, right, why can't Palestinians just go to somewhere in Africa, somewhere in Europe, and assimilate and be okay, right? Why do they want to return to this land? Your ancestors constantly said, I want to return to this land for 2,000 years ago, and you think Palestinians are going to say, I'm done after only 78 years? To me, that's insane, absolutely insane. But Bilal, I want your take as a Palestinian, whether you imbibe that message or you see it differently.
No, I mean, I pretty much see it exactly as you mentioned. I think that there's a couple things here that I wanted to point out. First things first, I think, as you mentioned, it's classification. It's the use of words and terms that people try to group people in different manners. So, for example, as you mentioned, the common kind of I don't like to call it Jewish. I call this an Israeli perspective because I don't think most Jews do not have this perspective. But the pro-Israeli perspective, if that's what you want to call it, is that Arabs are Arabs and they can be just kind of distributed amongst other Arab countries and they wouldn't really see much of a difference in terms of culture or anything like that, which is obviously not true, right? It's similar to saying, for example, Hispanics are all the same, right? So that you could take somebody from Spain and throw them into, say, Argentina, take somebody from Argentina, throw them into Mexico, and that they would all just be normal, right? It's a very, so there's that part of it. The other thing about comparing traumas or trying to understand each other's trauma, I think that goes a little bit deeper. As you mentioned, David, the Nakba for you started in Europe. Let's go further. Let's understand the real trauma. The first Nakba, if that's what you want to call it, was the first exiled, people from the land by the Romans. If we really want to go back and think about it in that manner, and we can really start to kind of delve in, because the the trauma that was experienced by the Jewish people, was, first of all, it was a very long historical trauma, not something that, say, a person they wouldn't have experienced it whether directly or through their great grandparents, for example. It's something that's much further back in history, much further back in time, and so that developed in a different way than, say, Palestinian trauma, for example, since the Nakba, right? Since that was a little bit more closer and visceral, and you can see you can still talk to the people that first actually experienced it. So now, granted, if the Palestinian trauma lasts as long as what Jewish trauma was, then I feel like there would be a similar kind of progression of that trauma, and it would delve further into religion and faith. Just like it did, and it lasted in those spaces much longer, because that's how you hold on to things, right? It's within your culture and within your faith and your family. So, one thing that I wanted to kind of sidestep into is I want to understand that trauma better, the Jewish trauma better, right? I want to understand that from a Palestinian perspective, so I can compare and contrast and understand where that actually comes from, because I'll tell you what, as most Palestinians would say, well, yeah, I know that they longed for their land, but how can somebody really long for a land that they've never seen? Say a Ukrainian Jew or a Lithuanian Jew, how can they long for the land that they've never seen, that they're talking about happened thousands of years ago? How is that longing even similar, right? And so that's what I want to be able to really explain and understand. Go ahead.
That is a great point. That is a fantastic point. And I think from the Jewish perspective, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way we understand our identity, especially Ashkenazi Jews, because I think this is the crux of the conversation, they were enslaved into Europe via Rome 2,000 years ago. And from there, we basically been going state to state, right? Never belonging in those countries. So when we say, I think Jews have a hard time comprehending the Palestinian perspective on this, because Palestinians will say, oh, you're just Ukrainian, you're just Russian, you're just German. And in our eyes, we were never that, right? We were never accepted by the host states as such. We were persecuted as a foreign ethnic group in their lands. And B, we felt that we were more connected to our fellow Jews than the Gentiles in those lands. And we believed our identity did not stem from those lands. Ancestrally speaking, we just did not belong there. We happened to be expelled from Rome, and from there went to Germany, from there went to Poland, and after we were expelled from Poland, we went to Ukraine, right? But we never originated in those places. Our culture, while we picked up elements in diaspora of our host nations, we never sprang from there. And not only that, we were never accepted by the host nation as a fully equal participant in that society. A Russian, an ethnic Russian, never viewed a Jew as Russian. They viewed him as a Jew, right? And so that's how we also viewed ourselves. And so
let me ask you this, because this is exactly what I was talking to my brother about this the other day. We were talking about this. For example, there's obviously a very big difference between the assimilation of Western European Jews and Eastern European Jews with their host countries, if you will. Sure. So there's obviously, for example, in Eastern Europe, you literally had shtetls, right? You had the Pale of Settlement, right? You have these areas where literally Jews were basically told, you stay over there, and then our people stay over here. So it's an obvious. If you want to call it hafrada, you can call it hafrada, right? It's a literal separation of peoples. And so that was a thing in Eastern Europe. In Western Europe, I would say, like, for example, English Jews, right? Yeah. British Jews, French Jews. I feel like they were more assimilated with their host countries. So it seems like the Jewish kind of experience, especially when it comes to its connection to Palestine or connection to Jerusalem or connection to Israel, it kind of deferred. It depended on where they lived, because it seems to me, and again, this is something that this is all just things that I've read and kind of understood over time. For example, Sephardic communities or the Mizrahi communities were not necessarily as Zionism didn't stem from those places, right? It started in Eastern Europe, which would make sense because it was the least assimilated place. They were the most othered, right? Yes. Compared to the other places. And so it seems like the trauma began there. you know?
Believe it or not, that trend also continues somewhat into Mizrahi communities, and Iraq is the best example of this. So Jews in Baghdad were by far the most assimilated Jews in the entire Middle East. They spoke Arabic, they dressed like Arabs, everything was Arabic for them, right? But if you
was also considered
if you move a little north into the Kurdish regions, the Jews there were not assimilated at all. They didn't even speak Kurdish; they spoke Aramaic, and they were some of the earliest Zionists in the Mizrahi world because they only were focused on their in-group. Right? It was a very similar social situation to Eastern European Ashkenazim, who, like you just perfectly described, were very isolated in their own ethnic little shtetl, speaking Yiddish and not the host language. And so you're 100% right. The lack of assimilation create different political circumstances for different Jewish communities. And it's not exclusive at all, in my opinion, for just Ashkenazi versus Sephardi or Mizrahi. But it does make sense that it also was birthed in Europe because that's where that form of Western-style nationalism really took root. You wouldn't see that in the Middle East. But regarding the Western European assimilation of Jews, that was a relatively recent advent, especially by the time Herzl was around. They had only really been emancipated with Napoleon. And so by that point, it was only around 150 years. Napoleon was the one who said Jews deserve full and equal rights in the societies that basically he had control over, so most of Western Europe. And from that point on, that's when you see Jews no longer speaking Yiddish in Western Europe, but rather the host language. That's when they're becoming more secular, less religious. But that advent never reached Eastern Europe because they're never liberated. They're never emancipated. They stayed in their shtetls. They weren't welcomed in Eastern European institutions. They remained their own little ethnic enclave. And so it's this weird combination of the nationalism that's permeating throughout Europe with the regressive social status of Jews in Eastern Europe to culminate in a staunch support of Zionism. And you're completely right. Although Herzl was a secular Jew, very assimilated in Hungary, his base of support was all Eastern European Ashkenazis. They like when he would go tour Eastern Europe, they would be shouting, they would be calling him King David or the second coming of David. They loved him. In Western Europe, they're like, why are you trying to mess our assimilation goals up, right? We want to assimilate into these societies. We don't yearn to go to Palestine, right? That's a regressive view. In fact, Reform Judaism, a very Western advent in Jewish consciousness, specifically tried to define Judaism as solely a religion. Said we're no longer a nation, not an ethnicity, just a religion. Because of that, we don't have any connection to Palestine. There's some rabbis that today are also promoting this and say our sole definition, the only thing unifying us is religiosity, nothing more, nothing less. And so I think that is... Yeah, sorry, go ahead, David. I don't want to monopolize.
We know who you are. We know who you are.
Yes.
Rabbi, we don't need to say this rabbi's name. And I mean, because this is no offense. This rabbi is very, very pro-Palestine. It's just I just don't agree that Jewish is a religion. Judaism is a religion.
Yes.
There's the Jewish people, and then there's Judaism. You can convert to Judaism, and you have no ethnic connection to the Jewish people. But then you marry. It's a way to marry in to the fold, and then your child. You probably marry someone who's ethnically Jewish, and then your child becomes part of the Jewish bloodlines. But the Jewish people are the Jewish people.
Yeah.
That have a creed.
You know who knows that better than anyone? It's the Muslim world, right? They call us Banu Israel, the children of Yaqub, of Israel. And so they understand we have common descent. We trace that back to Jacob. This rabbi in question, he likes to say, because Jews and Arabs both descend from Abraham, how can one claim to be its own unique ethnic identity? And my response is go a little down the generational line, you'll get to Jacob, and that's who we all point to as a common progenitor. But there are commonalities beyond religion that bind all Jews together. The fact that a Yemenite Jew and an Ashkenazi Jew would probably both greet each other by saying shalom, that we both put up, for example, during our weddings, we break glass. That's not necessarily something prescribed in our religious texts. It's just something we collectively do to commemorate the destruction of the temple. There are aspects beyond mere religiosity that bind us together, including descent, including common culture, cultural aspects. Although we have unique cultural aspects, if you're Sephardi, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, but we also have stuff that binds us together between those groups. And so I don't disagree with that. I do disagree with that rabbi on his definition of the Jewish people, but I heavily respect his empathy for the Palestinian people.
Heavily respect him. Just respectfully disagree with his point of view, and address it, Bilal, addressing your question of trauma. Like there's a couple of things I wanted to address. I forget. It's a little bit. I kind of forget what I want to say, but let me try to remember. You're trying to understand the Jewish trauma and how it's different from Palestinian trauma, and I'm keep wanting to say like it's not so different. It's almost like we can look at each other as mirror images of each other. Like what the Palestinians are going through now is like exactly what the Jewish people were going through, during the Roman period. And then there's something I've always wanted to ask as Palestinian is like, can we do a thought experiment? Like, the occupation is going to end soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay. But for the sake of this thought experiment, could you imagine what happens if it takes hundreds of years for this occupation to end? Okay, and you're in the diaspora. Chas v'chalila, that means God forbid. Okay, you're in the diaspora for a generation, then another generation. How many generations, as a Palestinian, do you think it would take for you to forget about Palestine? Because your one of your mantras is we will never forget. It doesn't matter how long we're going to come back. But that sounds exactly like us. I mean, 5 generations down, you've married someone who's not Palestinian, and your grandson's married someone who's not Palestinian. But you've ingrained it. You've raised them to never forget about Palestine. So this is exactly what happened to us, right?
Yeah.
And how about 2,000 years?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and if the answer is no, at a certain point I give up, then maybe you have an argument for like how come you can't. It doesn't make sense anymore, your story that you never gave up, But if your answer is we will never give up, like, so you're looking in a mirror. You're literally looking into a mirror of you generations later, because we didn't give up. Like we somehow preserved a Jewish identity, and sometimes use the religion as a way of preserving it. Like a lot of what's embedded in the Jewish religion are ways not to forget this land. Like the talit. Is you're still wearing this garment that was worn back then. The holidays, all of our holidays are really Canaanite holidays, but that's an aside. Are holidays that are fundamentally connected to the Palestinian agriculture cycle.
Yeah.
So by practicing Pesach and by practicing Shavuot and Sukkot and even Hanukkah, I believe that Hanukkah is tied to the.
It's tied to Shavuot. Yeah, it's tied to Shavuot. Yeah, that's a weird history, though. It's because. Go ahead.
I believe that Hanukkah is actually connected to the olive harvest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's in the winter. It's when you finally finish picking the olive. There's no more olives on the trees. The previous olive harvest is dwindling. There was no oil on the menorah, and then you're pressing the new olives of this year, and then you light the Hanukkah candle. It's at the right time. It's connected to olive oil, because in the temple they use olive oil. My point is like it was to continually connect yourself to this land.
Yeah.
And some consider it in a religious way, but I believe that, like, because I'm not religious, I present as religious. I know that, and I'm a believer. I really believe it. Like, this is the Jewish faith is my way to connect, to the divine. I'm very spiritual, and I practice the Jewish faith, but I don't want to call it, I practice the Jewish religion. And all these things that are in the Torah, it's not to be religious. It's a way to connect to the land as a Jewish person. The other thing I want to address, like you said, like you understand Jewish trauma and what it feels like, and then you said that the Nakba really began with the Romans. The Nakba, you want to go really all the way back. You know where the Nakba began. It began with the Canaanite expulsion from this land, right? Yeah. And it's a controversy about who did this, because according to our tradition, it was the Yeshua ben Nun, Musa, he passes on the torch to Yeshua. They come and they do this conquest, and they either expel or they kill the Canaanites that are living here. Yeah. Historians say it was the Palestinian, the Paleshit, where the Palestinians take their namesake, is from these sea people that come from the Aegean Sea. It's the fall of the Bronze Age. It's the Bronze Age collapse. Everything's haywire. The only ones who really survived the Bronze Age collapse is Egypt. But everything else, Turkey, Anatolia, it was a huge Hittite kingdom. The Hittim, they fall, and in this vacuum, the sea people come in and they conquest Canaan.
Yeah,
and then Yeshua ben Nun, or the later Israelites, they take credit for it, which is for something that they didn't even do. And what I believe is actually it was probably a bit of both. And then the second, after the 5 books of Moses, the rest of the Tanakh, the Old Testament, according to the Christians, the Old Testament, after the Canaanites are almost not in this picture at all. And it's between these two people, the Plishtim and the Israelim, and then they become Israel and Yehuda, the Jews, battling it out. They both came from different places, and like, no, this is mine. Israel is like, no, this is mine. Plishtim are like, no, this is mine. And it was really Canaan.
And I think one of the things, though, that want people, when we say, a place was conquered, for example, when the Philistines came and conquered, I think they conquered mostly the coastal strip, right? Yes. You had
close to modern-day Gaza.
Yeah, Gaza, exactly, all the way up to basically to like Jaffa area, right? That was their general area. The mountains and the hills, the Judean hills, still had Israelites, obviously, and the rest of the Canaanite tribes and whatnot. There's like loads of them, right? There's Canaanite is kind of a catch-all term, right, for all of those peoples that were in that region. And so one thing that I always want to point out is when we talk about like history and who was where and who controlled what area, it's not like they completely brushed out the entire population. They just presided over the population. The people generally stay. There's just the new guy that they have to pay their taxes to. And so when we say Palestinians, or when we talk about indigenous, or we talk about people that are just generally there. So, for example, when the Jews were exiled by the Romans didn't clean out the entire land of Israel. No, there were many people and many Jews that still lived there. When prior to that, when the Babylonians came, they took 70,000 Jews, I believe, is the typical number used. So there's loads of people left, and so I think that's one thing that we tend to have an issue with, or we try to we tend to misunderstand, is that these people still they just live there, and as they live there, their natural surroundings change, their geopolitical situations change around them, and they change with them. So many of those Jews became they didn't become Gentiles, but many of them became Christian. Many of them became Muslim down the line. We talked a little bit about Sabbatai Zevi the last time we talked, Elijah, and that's a very interesting discussion as well. But more importantly, the same goes, for example, the Jews that moved. Now, I think that the Jews that exiled and ended up, for example, in Eastern Europe, the reason they were still kind of held within and kept their Jewishness, if that's a term, right, is the fact that they were so unassimilated, right? They were siloed for a long period of time, and the only culture that they connected to was the culture that they brought with them. which is why they have that deep connection to the land, because they feel, obviously it was reinforced by their religion, by their culture, by their day-to-day feeling and thought, right? They moved to a land where they did not feel at home, and the people around them didn't invite them to be at home, and so they always kind of felt being other, right?
Yes.
So from a Palestinian's perspective, we were always, I guess this kind of comes from Arab nationalism in the 60s, right? It comes from Islam and the rise of Islam, and then Islamism down the line. So so a regular Palestinian's perspective is, okay, hold on, but the Jews, there's Jews that lived in Palestine for many, many years, and that are part of us and that have lived there. You can go to Mia Sharim, and you can go to, even though I know a lot of Jews don't necessarily believe the Samaritans are, but the Samaritans have been here for a very long time as well, obviously.
They're Israelites, at least.
They're Israelites, right? So we've lived with them, we've connected with them, and they've had very similar culture as us. Whereas you have the Ashkenazis, which we understand, the Ashkenazim held on to the love and the connection to the land, but the culture of the Ashkenazim that moved to Palestine in the 30s and 40s was very different. It was a dichotomy between the way that they approached things and the way that the native population approached things. It was a very different perspective. And right. I think that difference in perspective was a shock, right? It was a deep shock, and that shock was what just developed into these two peoples. Let me put it to you this way: if the Jews in Europe, for example, instead of coming to Palestine and establishing a Jewish state, they came to Palestine as refugees to become Palestinian, there would have been a very different outcome with the way things were. But there was a political and like a social focus on making sure to differentiate between the people that were living there and these new immigrants, these new migrants that are coming from Europe and elsewhere. So that's where I really have always had trouble. Like, I've always tried to figure out or understand deeply. There seems to be different reasons why the Jewish people cherish the land. You have the religious Jews, which obviously there's a lot of religious connection, but then you have the secular Jews who obviously don't have that religious connection, but they also have their own reasons why they cherish this land. And that's where I really, David, thank you, because you kind of explained some of that to me, is that it was still very much deeply part of your culture, even if it wasn't necessarily religious.
But I see, I'm sorry. I got to jump in because I don't see how some of these people that I'm watching on my feed, like, I don't see how these people cherish this land. The people are burning olive trees with kippahs and like, I don't understand this mentality. I really don't. I didn't know that these people existed until 3-4 years ago, and now I'm in continual shock. Like, I don't understand where your mind is, because they can't, like, with these actions, they can't possibly cherish this land. These olive trees are holy to us too. They're holy for the Palestinians. They're holy to us. You don't burn these trees and cherish this land at the same time. It's not possible.
I do want to jump in, Bilal, because you bring up many salient points, and history proves you right. So for you mentioned the Jewish community, say in Jerusalem and Mea Shearim. Believe it or not, a lot of that community is pre-Zionist Ashkenazi communities who came from the Litvaks, from like Lithuania, and settled into Jerusalem. And they were Ashkenazi, and they were just fine. Sephardic communities in the 1500s make up the majority of Jews in the land prior to those Ashkenazis coming. Before that, the land was not as beneficial for Jews, right? Especially after the Byzantine period, there weren't too many Jews in the land. Muslim governments there did allow Jews to return, but there wasn't that many. It was only with the Inquisition that we started seeing more return. And for the most part, they got along fine. Most of them, including even the Ashkenazis in Jerusalem, learned Arabic. They assimilated relatively well. They maintained Yiddish, Ladino for private spheres, but definitely learned Arabic for public spheres. But they were relatively integrated. Something interesting that I've read that really also drives this home is a Western misunderstanding of property rights that made even the early Zionist eras a lot of conflict between the Jewish migrants from Eastern Europe and the local Palestinians, and this would especially occur in rural areas. So the Western conception of property is, oh, we own this land, you can't come on my land, no one's allowed to trespass. And for the rural Fellahin, they said, what? Like, this is where our flocks graze, right? This is not how we conceive of property. And so there was also these social misunderstandings between the Jewish migrants and especially the rural Palestinians. This didn't really occur as much in, say, Jerusalem or the big cities, because those were more Western oriented in terms of their social notions of property rights and all that. But especially with the rural Palestinians, when you had the first Aliyah and the Zionist Jews coming in and then firing at Palestinians trying to come onto their land because their flocks want to graze, that's where you see a lot of these early conflicts arise, because they were Westernized, because they had these Western conceptions of property and social obligations. But I don't think the culture themselves, right, the different cultures between Ashkenazi Jews and Palestinians was the source of conflict. It was the Westernization, both mental and social, of Ashkenazi Jews that really created a lot of these conflicts. The inability to understand that these people have a different conception of social obligations, and they came into this land bringing in the Western sphere when they should have been looking to assimilate, to understand the local Semitic culture, which they failed to do, I think. Yeah, but David, tell me if you agree or not.
100%. And one more point I want to get back to of Bilal. You touched on how, look, when my Jewish education, which is a very much a Zionist education, it is. I didn't know about this word Zionism actually growing up. I didn't, my school was Zionist, but I don't know if we brought this up last time we spoke, but I never called it a Zionist school. I called it a Jewish school. Yeah. But we didn't learn about what happened from the Romans to now, right? It's just this big, just empty blur. And you get the impression that what happened there was the destruction of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. There was this big diaspora, because we're in the diaspora now, right? So and the land was completely empty. A people for a land without the people, or whatever it is. Like, that's the impression you got. Like, it was desolate.
Yeah.
And
I see what you mean. That's the kind of the mindset that they put you in.
But what actually happened was that it was this beginning of this big diaspora, but at least half of the population stayed, and it was the Roman people just ruling over them.
Yeah.
And there was a time a couple hundred years after that, after Bar Kokhba, that the Jews were completely expelled from Jerusalem. But the rest of Judea, the rest of Judea, Al Khalil, Hebron, there were still Jews there, and then
most of them went north into the Galilee. Most of them, they set up.
There's a lot. Yes,
mainly in the Galilee. You're 100% right.
But this population was the first population to accept the teaching of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they were Christian by faith, but they were still Jewish people. They were, I'm sure they still considered themselves Jewish, but they just accepted Jesus, right? And then a few hundred years later, Muhammad, they accept Islam as a faith, But so when I keep coming back to this point, like, we actually really are the same people. This is not just some kind of like beautiful thing to say to unite us. Like, there were the Jewish people who were in the diaspora, and we married Europeans, we married Iraqis, and we married Ethiopians, and then there's the Jews that stayed here and eventually started calling themselves Palestinians. If it was in the 60s with Yasser Arafat, if it was 100 years ago, if it was 200 years ago, I don't know. That's also a blur for me. Yeah. But somehow you start calling yourselves Palestinians, right?
Yeah, if you call yourself what the people around you call you, right? So like that's kind of what ends up happening, right? Because before the word Palestinian was used, people around Al-Quds, my family's from Al-Quds, we're from a village near Al-Quds.
Okay.
We're called
right.
Maqdisi, a lot of families are Maqdisi or Nabilsi or Birawi or Liddawi. It's based on, where you're from or the general area. Before that, say that your family had moved from Masr, you might be Al-Masri, right? Or your family had moved in from, the Sham typically is just usually, even Palestine is still called Southern Sham, right? But say that you moved from like Damascus or whatever, you would be a Shami. And so
Daoud.
Daoud. My last name is Daoud.
And what's that in relation
David.
to?
It's
I know that, but for what reason? Is it because David comes from that area, or is it you have someone in the family, or do you know the history of your last name?
It's just like most Arabic last names. We so like my full name, Bilal Ribhi Muhammad Hussein Sulaiman Daoud. So so now what we know is usually you do your name, your dad's name, his dad's name, their dad's name, and then there's usually a gap. It's hard to kind of gauge how far that gap is, but typically it's up until usually like the founder of the family or the village or something along those lines, something impactful, major that changed for the family. So Daoud is our last name, right? So, and that's a pretty popular one, obviously, with Palestinians. Very, very Jewish as well, if you think about it. So and then Suleiman was the one prior to that. So there's a lot. It's pretty much in your face, right? It's very much in your face, but it's still a huge. 2,000 years makes a big difference. You know, it does a lot. It does a lot.
I want to also comment on the fact that when we're speaking about why Palestinians were able to also more readily, say, adopt Islam, right? And Jews in Europe were more staunch and held on to their identity. I think the European social environment was much more conservative than the Middle East, right? The Middle East made it much more easy to adopt whatever the language was. They didn't isolate minorities, right? In Europe, right, Jews were the only minority for 2,000 years, and so they were kind of the punching bag of Europeans.
The Romani.
The Romani, exactly. Yes, the Romani and the Sinti people as well. They came a little later than Jews, around the year 1000, I think. But them too, they were very socially isolated and maintained their identity. Whereas a lot more Jews in the Middle East or in other minorities in the Levant and elsewhere, and Syrians and other groups were under empires that did not really hate them for their identity. Right. At worst, you probably had to pay a tax for social protections, the jizya, but the Arabic language was just put in their societies. They adopted the Arabic tongue. And from there, if they wanted to maintain the religion, you're allowed to. But if you want to convert to Islam, you want to speak Arabic, be an Arab, that's also encouraged, right? You have social benefits with that. And so I think there's a different social dynamic. Europeans were not the most receptive to Jews being part and parcel in their society as equals. They did not like that. They wanted us to be socially restricted in our ghettos, never equals in their society. But in the Middle East, that social dynamic wasn't at play, right? There was no hierarchy, right? There was a sense of, we're all the same peoples, we're all the same race. We might have different religions. You might have to pay a tax for that, but there's no social difference between us. Of
course, I'm sure there were still elite families and, ruling families and authorities that had kind of special perks. But like you said, if you think about it this way, the Mamluks, who were probably the most conservative, kind of stringent, the Mamluks were like they came from enslaved soldiers. That came from like the Cossack region, right? So like it was never really the ethnicity part was not really like the major kind of like social factor, if you will.
Exactly. And you see especially in Inquisitor Spain how palpable this is, because they're talking about Jews and Arabs, right? Muslim and Arab was typically synonymous back then. They said both these people are foreigners. Their blood is foreign from this,
the Moors,
from this continent, from this place, right?
The Jews and the Moors. That's right.
Yes, they do not belong here.
And you had some of the most powerful, well-known minds in the Jewish sphere, if you will, Maimonides. These people all lived during the what is it called? Oh my gosh,
the Golden Age.
the Andalusia. Sorry.
Yes.
The time of Andalusia. So yeah, it's really insane how much of a difference and I think kind of tying back to our original kind of discussion about Canaan and the words and you know how people kind of relate to all this. I think what we're all realizing, the problem really is nationalism in this Western context.
Yes.
It doesn't fit this land. It doesn't fit that area. It just doesn't it doesn't match. There's too many people that are too closely related and too similar, but are just slightly different in different ways, that this idea of nationalism in that sense just does not work. And I think maybe, like, subhanAllah, it might be one of those things, this is me personally, I believe that this land is going to be kind of, like, the resolution of this will kind of be the end of that post-World War II nationalism in some ways. I think that's where we're kind of heading towards, you know, because we're now realizing that international law doesn't necessarily play the same, or it's not necessarily given the same status to different countries, right? Different countries can kind of tweak and use international law and our rules in the way that they would like. The UN doesn't necessarily have the same final say in matters. It's not necessarily the forum that of everybody being able to all these different peoples and different nationalities being able to step in one place and be able to actually speak fairly and come up with rules fairly. Just that's all kind of disintegrating.
Yes. The nation state model,
for better or worse.
Yes. The nation state model is completely foreign to the entire Middle East, especially the Levant. The European powers, especially under the mandatory period, really tried to conflate specific ethno groups and give them their state, right? Syria was the best example of this. Druze get a state, Arabs get a state, every little ethnic group gets a state. You're all divided and conquered under the French model. Israel, Palestine, same concept. Jews get the state, and everyone else who's not Jewish, you're an Arab, you get your own state, right? That's how they thought of the region, but for thousands of years, that's not how it worked, right? There was not these closed off borders. It makes no sense to your grandparents' generation, Bilal, of how someone probably in southern Lebanon could be distinct from someone just south of the border in the Galilee and be considered a whole another national group. That's completely foreign. The way the world used to work is you could wake up in Damascus, have tea in Beirut, finish your day off in Jerusalem or Al Khalil, right? That was their world. There was not these staunch nationalistic borders dividing the entire region. And I think that's what we're working towards. We're working towards overcoming the nation state model in favor of something where everyone in the entire region is A, decolonizing, because we're returning to the social equilibrium that preceded colonization, and B, we are all going to be full and equal participants in that future national ethos. And I think that's what we're trying to do, right? That's what Cananism is. It's an attempt at that. I think as the bias towards the Western white world is revealed to all, especially to Westerners themselves, I think that is doing us the best favor possible to degrade the system. And it's really priming our solution, right? To be at the forefront.
As we work through the system, sorry to cut you off there, but as we work through this, because we are also have to be realists, right? We have to be pragmatic and understanding of just rational, right? We are living in a nation state world. And so, yes, you need to put a name to something. And so, like, that's where the idea of just, okay, let's go back to a name that everybody can agree to, right? But like you guys said, it's all about, in reality, it's all about the land itself, not necessarily the word that we want to put on it. I think that the land should just be able to be named like a religious Jew that believes that that sees this as the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, then they should be able to call it that, right? A Palestinian that it has lived here for centuries, his family's lived here for centuries, they see it as Palestine, they call it Palestine, right? And for the people that are that just want to have more of a political kind of neutral word, Canaan is perfect for that. And so, like, how do you get to that point though from where we are today? I think the most important thing right now is everybody needs to accept that everybody living here deserves to live here. Right? That everybody living here has a place to live here. And I think
there's also an added element. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I was going to add that not only do they have a right to live here, they have a right to live anywhere in the entire land.
Yes.
I think what especially Jewish Zionists fail to grasp is the Palestinian bond, not just to a state in this land, but to the specific localities where their identity was shaped from, right? And you were talking about this in the surnames, right? How often, if your last name is Qudsi or something, right? You're related to Jerusalem, right? For so many generations, Palestinians always said, "I am from Jerusalem, I'm from Haifa, and then I am Palestinian." The city always took precedence. And for both peoples to fully express their identities and desires in the land, the basic guarantee you have to give everyone is freedom of movement. You have to be able to live anywhere in the land. And
Yes.
I think that until that right is enshrined, conflict will continue.
Yeah.
I think Palestinians will feel as if they are a foreigner and not equal in this land if they can't live back in 48 Palestine, in contemporary Israel. And similarly, the Israelis who feel very connected to the stories of the Bible, that's Judea and Samaria, that is the West 100%. Bank today. They have to live there, or else they'll feel as if their identity isn't able to be fulfilled. They don't want to live in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is to them a Western city.
I hate the fact that it really bothers me that for example, Jews that want to go to the shrine in Nablus and Shechem can't get there without the IDF, right?
Yeah.
That's not right. That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
That should be a place where they can go without any problems. It drives me crazy that you see these big red signs that say it's dangerous for Jews to go into Area A.
But this is Israel that does that. That's Israel to scare the Israeli people.
It's Hafrada. It's the policy of keeping people split, right? And so that's the number one thing that needs to go. And I think, even tomorrow, if Israel, the state of Israel, not the nation, right? The state of Israel decided tomorrow, okay, guys, here's the deal. Everybody if you're Palestinian, here's yours. You literally just you give back your Palestinian passport, you get an Israeli passport, you pay your arnona, you're a Palestinian living in Israel, and you can go anywhere and live anywhere. I would say 95% of the people would agree like this, right? No question. So I don't think the problem is there. The problem is obviously, I think I think that the problem is that Israelis feel that when the moment that happens, that the Israeli identity disappears, right? That the Israeli kind of, and I think that that's not necessarily true. Go ahead.
In a way, it will. I'm sorry to say this. In a way, I mean, that's what this that's what this is all about. No. I don't. I think that the Israeli identity it will continue, but it will change so radically.
Yeah.
I mean, the what's the Israeli dress? I mean, the only national dress is the army uniform. Other than that, what is Israeli dress? Yeah. Once they don't have the army uniform, it will be a completely different identity. But it will stay. There's Israeli music. You can't really I've been struggling, like, what is Israeli, because everything that I thought Israeli is actually Palestinian. All Israeli food there's no such thing as Israeli food,
Yeah.
But there is Israeli music and there is Israeli poetry.
Yeah.
And that will continue. But what this is really all about is Israel is only Israel when it is a Jewish majority.
Yes.
And like, why hasn't Gaza been given citizenship? Why hasn't the West Bank been given citizenship? It's because once that happens, it's just not Israel anymore, because it will be 50-50, maybe even a slight Palestinian majority. And then that's it. It's not a Jewish democracy, because it will continue to be a democracy, because we want a democracy, and we've created a really good infrastructure, a really good health system. I'm not going to say good education system because it's fucking propaganda, but like that can't get deconstructed. We want to keep that, right? And we want to keep the democracy, but it won't be a Jewish democracy. It will not. And so, I mean, it will be Israel in name, and then it will only be a matter of time. That a 50% Palestinian population will say, well, hey, like, we're calling this country Israel, but I don't identify with this identity. That's not my identity. Are you can still have Hatikva, where the national anthem does not address your your life, your aspirations, it will change. And like Canaan, I honestly believe that this is going to happen organically. You know, we don't need to push anything. We just keep
saying it, espousing
saying it.
Yeah.
So already someone's spoken to me like, is this a thing? Like, is privately like, how is this Canaan thing is like an official organization, a movement? I'm like, yeah, no, it actually we're completely serious. Like, I'm like, is there a lot of people? I'm like, well, we're a small group right now, but it's gonna grow. And like they're interested in speaking to them, or they've maybe already formulated this thought and now they're hearing other people say it. You know, like it's going to happen. It's just such a natural next step.
You hit on something very important. You hit at something very important, and that's the definition of Israel as a Jewish state only has one characteristic. It's demographics. That's it. Right. It's having a demographic Jewish majority. Once you lose that, you lose, in my eyes, the Jewish state. There has been a subculture created within this state, for sure, right? That's natural over 80 years. That's going to happen, right? Like you said, they have poetry, they have music that's been created, and that will continue on probably amongst especially the Jewish community that continues to live in this state. But it will no longer be the national culture of this state, right? What will be the national culture of the state, and as we were mentioning, it will happen organically, is what unifies Jews and Palestinians. What we can point to as our common ethos, and we'll rise that into becoming a common national ethos, right? And it's everything we've been talking about throughout this call, celebrating the fact that the Jewish holidays of Shavuot and Sukkot are the harvest of Palestinians, because we trace that back to a common source, to the Canaanites, right? That kind of thing will be enshrined at the national level, and a new culture will form around that. But does that mean we're going to intentionally erase what's been created amongst Israeli Jews? No, right? That's not what we aim to do. But a new culture based on our ancient predecessors is what will be created in this land. I think that is what will happen organically, because once our two peoples are full and equal participants under a common national identity, we're all interacting, there will even be intermarriage. This will be a natural byproduct of our two peoples simply engaging, creating their own artistic and cultural productions. And I can't wait to see what that is. I can't wait to see what that looks like. That'll be a beautiful day. But I agree with you fully, David. I think it will happen organically if we simply gave our peoples full and equal rights under a common ethos. That's all we need, and the rest will follow.
And perhaps maybe one idea to safeguard these two Palestinian and Jewish identities is to maybe have provinces.
We talked about this in the article. Yeah,
a Jewish or an Israeli province and a Palestinian province, but completely equal rights, no restriction of movement, no restriction of residency.
But having kind of slight autonomy to some degree.
Languages. Right. It's not even autonomy. It's a cultural thing. Yeah. People are afraid that this is a threat to their identity. You still have this state, a province of Israel in the province. It's kind of like Canada and Quebec.
French, Quebec,
where Anglo laws in Quebec that safeguard their culture and identity. You must, like, French is the language in the province of Quebec. You know, Hebrew could be the language of the province of Israel.
Right.
You know. Yeah. And but that you must learn Arabic. You must learn Arabic in an Israeli school, you know, in the province of Israel. You know, but it should be the same also in
Palestinian Arabic is changing on the daily compared to other Arabic, because of the Hebrew kind of influence. You know, I mean, obviously there's things that I've said before to my other Arab friends or Arabic speaking friends. They're like, what was that? Like, that wasn't even an Arabic word you just said. Like, for example, mahsoum. Mahsoum is the perfect one. I was like, yeah, I got stopped at a mahsoum, right? Yeah. And they're like, that's not right? Arabic, man. That I was like, oh, and then I finally realized it's not, it's not Arabic. It's like makba should be an Arabic word, right? It's Hebrew.
Hajjaj?
Or Hajjaz, right? Or Hajjaz, correct. So but and this happens in a lot of different places, and same thing with Hebrew. Obviously, a lot of Hebrew is borrowed Arabic, right? Hebrew is an old biblical language that had to be reconstructed, so they pulled a lot of something from something else that's Semitic, and that's Arabic. So
all Israeli slang is Arab, is Palestinian Arabic.
Well, it's because we curse a lot, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned actually earlier. You mentioned something about just the borders and the way something that just popped in my mind. One of the things that Israel's establishment and just this whole situation, the 77 years of division and problem. I think one of the biggest things that it took away from us is that open mixing, the open natural allowance of cultures to mix in that region. My grandfather, he was alive during the time where he could literally take a train in Jaffa and go all the way to Beirut, and come back, right? Mm-hmm. Or go to Cairo and come back. Like that was a thing that was real. And it's interesting because Israel as a state, to all of its point of wanting to be a Jewish state, it also kind of alienated itself from its neighbors in many different ways. And so, like, imagine as an example, an opening of these cultures to be able to connect in many different ways over the past 77 years. If that was a thing, then the Israelis of today would be more like their Arab neighbors and their Palestinian neighbors than they are today. Because in many different ways, Israel, in order to protect this Jewishness, it's had to alienate itself. It's had to block off itself. Prior to Oslo, Israelis used to be able to go to Ramallah, and they would shop in Ramallah, and they would shop in Jenin, and they would shop in Nakba.
Apparently Bethlehem also.
Yes.
There was a lot of...
It was very deep, and so Oslo came and kind of was a poison pill, because what also kind of like cemented was this idea that, okay, Palestinians are going to have their own, places and authority, and then Israelis will be here. Those red things that we were talking about, those red placards that they have, those went up the day Oslo took over. Yeah. They didn't show up after the Intifada or after whatever. They showed up after the peace accord was signed. Yeah. So when you are on one side signing a peace accord to try to build bridges and make a connection, but at the other side saying, "Hey, Jews, you go in here, you might die," like it's a problem.
Yes, exactly. A lot of people don't believe, especially my generation, that Palestinians, at least for your parents' generation, were able to go to the beach. They could go to Haifa. They could go to Jaffa. They could do these things back then. It was occupied, but they had freedom of movement through the occupation, right? The apartheid wall didn't exist. Sorry?
Before 67, someone in Ramallah was able to go to the beach?
No. Before 67, no.
No.
Before 67.
Specifically after 69, I think, was actually when it really began, because that's when Jordanians officially relinquished control, and then Israel occupying after.
Sorry, but
after the occupation, after the 64. Yes.
You were able to go to the beach.
Yes. Until Oslo.
And then when it got stopped at Oslo.
It stopped basically right after Oslo. Yeah. Up until really, I would say Oslo created the political and administrative division. Yes. But there was you can still get a tasrih pretty easily and go. But then obviously things really shut down after the second Intifada, right?
That's when all the roadblocks and
that's when everything really kind of shut down. But yes, obviously between 67 and 93, there was pretty much open connection between. Yes, you had the West Bank Hawiya was orange instead of green, right, back in the day, and it was it was a Kogat symbol instead of the Palestinian emblem, right, the Palestinian Authority emblem. What's that?
What symbol was it?
It was Kogat, the Israeli administrative authority in the territory.
Yeah,
that was the only difference, right? But
Like,
but other than that, you used to be able to cry and go and just it was normal, you know.
unbelievable. It's
But
unbelievable.
yeah, Bilal, one thing you hit on, and we probably will stay on for like 10 more minutes, but I think it's really important, and I think we talked about it a little in our last episode, is the isolative nature of Israel. And we were trying to figure out the origins of this, right? Is it only related to modern day nationalism, where they really wanted to isolate from the Arab states because they're a demographic threat? And then I postulated that it really goes back to Jewish history in Europe specifically, right? Because in the shtetls, they were always isolated in very restricted manners. They only had their own little societies, and that was life for them. And to me, Israel is the national manifestation of that in many respects. It is the national ghetto of the Jewish people, that isolated from the region as a whole. And it makes sense when an Ashkenazi Jew who was never accepted in European society, was persecuted, did not trust their Gentile neighbors, brought that baggage into the Middle East and created a society on the national level that replicated that. And I think to officially end Zionism, you have to confront that fear. You have to prove to Jews, especially Ashkenazi Jews, that that fear is not valid in this region. That is a fear of Europe. That was a fear of Europeans coming in saying you're not part of their society and persecuting you. The Middle East never had that social dynamic, as we just talked about. And so I think one of the keys to ending Zionism is elevating the social dynamics of the Middle East, showing that Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews were thriving in many respects. We talked about Maimonides. He was a doctor of the Sultan. I don't think an Ashkenazi Jew would have been able to elevate anything close to that in their relative societies. They probably were persecuted by most kings and queens. So I don't think you would ever find them being a doctor or a high official in those governments. But I think the key to ending Zionism, ending a Jewish exclusive state, is proving to all the Jews in this land that they will be full and equal participants if they relinquish their demographic majority and their isolated structures in the state. I think that is key to this.
And you need to. It needs to be convincing. I mean, Jewish people need to believe that this is true. You know what I'm saying? Because I really do think this is the fear. This is the fear. Once there's not a Jewish majority in this country, Israel, and then it expands into from the river to the sea, they're like, what's gonna happen to Syria? Gonna happen to us? Is what's gonna happen in Lebanon gonna happen to us? You know what I'm saying? I really do believe this is a legitimate fear that Jews have.
And when what was happening to the Druze was going down, a lot of the arguments you saw at the state level in Israel for why they have to intervene is they said that would be us if we were at the behest of a Sunni Arab majority and we were the minority in this state. That's what would happen to us at the hands of Islamists. And in my eyes, the only way to convince people that that will not be the social dynamic that happens if Jews happen to be a minority in a pan-Levantine or pan-Canaan state is history. I mean, like before the creation of Israel, Palestine itself was one of the best places for Jews to live, right? There were multiple communities across the entire region. And in fact, Palestinians were one of the groups that would specifically take in Jews when they were persecuted. I mean, the Hadids share this story a lot about how their family took in Holocaust survivors fleeing the Poland concentration camps. And so this was embedded in the history of Palestinians. And it's very ironic that one of the first decrees of Islam in Palestine by the Caliph at the time was to allow Jews to return to Jerusalem. Right, that was one of his first instances. Yes. He was so upset that the Romans and the Byzantines put their trash all over the Holy Temple and said, "How can these Europeans do this? Right, this is holy to the Jews and it's thus holy to us. We need to get Jews back here and also to clean out the site that these Europeans have tarnished." That was one of the first acts of Islam in Palestine, and so the history of Islam and Arabs with the Jewish people is one of equality and coexistence. And then sadly, that's been forgotten. But by iterating that history to the Jewish people, I think that is the key. And that's how we can convince them. It's going to be hard, but I think that is at least the first step.
Talking about it every single day. That's that's really what it comes down to. I think I'm very excited to have these discussions with you guys and to keep this going. It's something that I talk about to, talk to everyone that I know about this whenever these discussions come up. Because obviously and I'm sure you guys know, like it's very personal for me. It's affected my family. It's affected like many. We've had family in jail. We've had family killed. We've had that's every Palestinian family. So I'm not saying anything unique or specific. But I think it's something that I don't want my kids, and I definitely don't want my kids' kids to have to go through. Yes. And so that's why it's so important for me to be able to say something, and I hope, David and Hayan and everybody, Elijah, you guys, this is the new kind of wave, and I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Like you said, it's a natural progression of things. It has to happen. It has to.
Yes, it really does.
This is the vision, to specifically upend this darkness, right? To upend the inequality, injustice, and oppression we're seeing not only in Israel-Palestine, but the entire Levant. I truly believe that when a Jew, a Palestinian, a Druze, a Beiruti, a Damascus, Sunni Arab, see each other and not say, oh, they're that ethnic group, but they're my brother. They're someone I see much more in common than what's dividing us. That, I think, is the path to end this.
For sure. We should be arguing about who has the best falafel and shawarma recipe, and not about anything else.
Exactly.
And I'll give it to the Lebanese. They have amazing food. I have to give it to them. I do.
They really do. They really do. But when we truly see ourselves as one family and not enemies, there's no better way to defeat hatred than perceiving someone as your brother, right? I don't want to kill you if I see you as my brother. I want to treat you as my brother. I want to uplift you. I want to make sure you're thriving, and that is what we're building through this through Cananism. I truly believe that this will be the outlet to upend all this darkness. And if we can bring this to the masses, we're doing our utmost now. I truly believe that this will be the path to finally rid us of this curse once and for all. Inshallah, B'ezrat Hashem.
Inshallah.
All right, guys.
I think that's a good ending.
It was awesome.
Yallah. Thank you all so much.
David, it was a pleasure meeting you. Can't wait to have this again.
I can't wait to speak to you again. I just want to just end this just on just one note. It's really important that I say this. Okay, Gaza is starving right now. Okay, we just need to put this into context. Like I am in such a it's very, very difficult. Really, really difficult to be here right now, and this whole time, this whole conversation, like it's just 4 hours away from where I'm living, and it's on my mind all the time. I have no idea what to do about this. I just don't know, and how just to go day to day. Like I've been doing fasts, right? And then obviously I just have to function, and I have kids, and it's the summertime, and and like joy is a big form of protest. Joy, like just deciding that I'm building a new system, and that system is going to be part of joy and happiness, and that's part of our activism, is to make sure that so I'm with my kids right now, and what I'm gonna what am I gonna do? I'm giving them a good good summer, and at the same time keep in mind what is happening just so close to me, and how you go forward. And I do these fasts. There's an activist, Mai Shaheen, that we've met in Al Nakhur. She's based in Beit Jala, and she's been fasting for 50 days.
Wow.
Just water and vitamins, I think, but she's such a badass. And I'm okay, you know what? I'll do these intermittent fasts, just not even, just so I can connect.
Yeah.
Just so that I'm physically connected to what's happening. So it's on my mind, because you can forget what's happening. You get caught up in your day, and especially if you're in the Israeli system. I don't watch the news, but if you're watching the news, that's it. You're gone. You have no idea what's going on. No idea. So I just needed to say that. Just we need to remember what's going on, and it
would have been improper. It would have been improper to go throughout the entire call and not bring up the genocide in Gaza. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, David, but I truly, whenever I see a picture of a starving child, it invokes memories of the Holocaust. I do see this as a contemporary Holocaust, 100%. And I'm like you, I'm stuck, especially because I'm here in the West. I'm not in the land like you. I feel stuck. I do all I can to amplify Gazan stories. I donate to the Gaza Soup Kitchen in every avenue I can to bring food to Gazans, but I still feel as if I'm helpless, that I've not contributed in any way, shape, or form to ending their suffering, as I'm just seeing more images of dead kids and starving kids. And I mean, I really don't know what to do at this point. I like you said, joy is one of the outlets for resistance and hope, and us envisioning and working towards a system that would eliminate this, that would create equality, prosperity, and liberation for all is joy, right? That we're us envisioning a future of kids, Jewish kids and Palestinian kids playing together in Gaza, Gazans being able to leave their concentration camp, their ghetto, and be able to live anywhere in the land because their ancestors were expelled in 48 and have all the rights in the world, or they should have all the rights in the world to live anywhere in the land, right? That future does give me a lot of joy. And I would definitely concur with you saying that is what brings me a lot of happiness amidst these really
We're going to see this. We're going to see this happen in our lifetime.
Inshallah.
I was going to say this whole discussion, like right before this discussion today, I went to had lunch with my wife in her office, and I was telling her, like, it's been very, very tough. It's been very hard. It's been getting very, very hard to be able to stay motivated, especially seeing the videos and the pictures. And I have friends that are practically family in Gaza, and I have friends here that their families are in Gaza, and so it's. But like you said, if you have to remember it, you have to know that it's happening, but at the same time, you can't let it freeze you. You can't let it debilitate your capability of doing something. And so, yeah, it's a tough balancing act. It's really not easy.
Yeah, if anything, it should motivate the work we're doing to do all we can to bring this into the forefront and become an actual political reality, so this never happens again. Inshallah, Bizlat Hashem.
Yeah. Inshallah, guys. Right. It was a pleasure. Okay. We'll talk soon.
As always.
We'll speak soon.
As always, love you all. Have a great evening. All right, and hopefully we can be back next month. Having these amazing conversations.
Just let me know.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys.
Take care.